Wei Wuxian took 2 steps and Lan Wangji followed 2 steps. Just as Lan Wangji was about to speak, the man in front of him suddenly turned around and said, "I can walk by myself." Lan Wangji wanted to speak but stopped. Wei Wuxian was now fully dressed. He wore Suibian and Chengqing on his waist. He felt more confident when talking to Han Guangjun. He raised his chin slightly and hummed, "What do you mean by that worried expression? Now I am planning to discuss sword skills with Yuan and the others. Do you want to stop me too?" Lan Wangji said, "They are not here." "Oh, really?" Wei Wuxian stepped forward, grabbed Lan Wangji's clothes and said with a smile, "That's just right. Is Han Guangjun free? Can you practice with me?" At this time, Wei Wuxian was holding back a lot of unknown anger. He was like a hedgehog with all its thorns standing on end. Lan Wangji stopped him from doing anything at this time. He might really go into a rage. Unexpectedly, Lan Wangji, who had insisted on helping him take a shower just now, agreed soon and took Wei Wuxian with Bishan without saying a word and went to an open and uninhabited place with his sword. Wei Wuxian's hair was messed up by the wind on Bishan, and his restless heart was also messed up. He himself couldn't explain the reason. He just felt that he was very angry and needed to vent his anger. As soon as Bishan stopped, he couldn't wait to jump down from the sword. Without waiting for a moment, he drew out Suibian and attacked Lan Wangji. Lan Wangji tapped his fingers, and Bishan jumped up to block his menacing attack. Then he grabbed the hilt of the sword and fought with Wei Wuxian seriously. Wei Wuxian had been practicing diligently in the past few days, many times more diligently than when he was studying in Gusu. In just a few days, his long-abandoned swordsmanship was already as good as when he was a boy, and even improved a bit. It's just that the golden core was still not yet ready, so he couldn't fight for a long time. He was attacking fast and hard at this time, and Lan Wangji was also going all out at all. The two of them performed 7 or 8 moves in one round and fought for dozens of rounds. Wei Wuxian's freshly bathed body became dripping with sweat again. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, and his mood felt much better. He raised his sleeves to wipe the sweat from his face and said, "Come again." Lan Wangji glanced at his legs and said, "Rest for now." Wei Wuxian wanted to refute subconsciously, but then he realized that his legs were so weak seriously that he could hardly stand, and there was no point in continuing the fighting. He spat, thrust Suibian into the ground, then sat down and adjusted the qi. Lan Wangji also put away his sword and came over to meditate with him without saying a word. After a while, feeling that he had enough rest, Wei Wuxian planned to continue again. He looked up and saw that Lan Wangji still had his eyes closed and Bishan was beside him. He couldn't help but stare at the spiritual sword for a moment. An idea suddenly came to his mind. It was Lan Zhan who brought me here by driving the sword just now. Now that I could use my sword again, could I also drive the sword again? Thinking of this, he jumped up from the ground. He didn't even bother to pat the dust on his body and summoned Suibian with his fingertips. "Wei Ying?" Lan Wangji stood up and stretched out his hand to straighten the hem of his clothes. However, Wei Wuxian controlled Suibian to fly around in the air several times with an excited look on his face and let the sword stop in front of him finally. Lan Wangji understood what he planned to do. Suibian descended to a suitable height. Wei Wuxian stepped on the narrow sword blade with one foot. Lan Wangji supported him calmly, and Wei Wuxian stepped on with his other foot. He opened his arms to maintain balance. His body swayed twice temporarily before standing firm. Wei Wuxian stood on the sword, a little taller than Lan Wangji, who was standing on the ground. He looked at him rather condescendingly and said, "Lan Zhan, are you going to stop me this time?" Lan Wangji shook his head and said, "I will accompany you." Wei Wuxian raised his eyebrows and laughed, then rushed forward a short distance as soon as Lan Wangji let go of his hand. Almost at the same time, Lan Wangji also jumped onto Bishan, following behind him closely. However, he did not interfere with his sword control, but always kept a distance not too far or too close to him. Wei Wuxian hadn't driven the sword for a long time, and he insisted on flying so fast right away. At first, his body swayed violently several times. Lan Wangji tried his best not to rush forward to stop him. Wei Wuxian tried hard to balance his body and soon found the feeling again, and he never swayed again after that. Suibian no longer looked like a sword. It had become a part of his body clearly, allowing him to fly freely in the air. Wei Wuxian was extremely excited, although he had always known that there would be a day like this sooner or later after he could use the sword again. But when it happened actually, He was still as happy as the day when he first learned how to drive a sword as a boy. No, the joy was even greater than anything else after he lost once. He stood on the sword and increased his speed immediately. He also took a few steps forward and backward on the sword. It seemed that he wanted to show off to someone. Flying so fast, Wei Wuxian could only hear the sound of wind in his ears, but he could still catch a glimpse of Lan Wangji not far behind him from the corner of his eye. Lan Wangji was keeping a distance and following him. No matter whether he flied fast or slow, Lan Wangji was always within his field of vision. Flying with a sword consumed more spiritual energy than simply using a sword, definitely. After all, Wei Wuxian had not formed the golden core yet. Before he could enjoy flying fully, he felt that his spiritual energy was somewhat exhausted. Although he was keen on challenges and loved to do exciting things, he was actually very cautious and had never really made risked his own life before. Therefore, after realizing this, he was ready to control Suibian to return to the ground. However, when he noticed that Lan Wangji behind him seemed to start to approach him secretly, Wei Wuxian changed his mind for some reason. Suddenly, Suibian, which was about to decline, accelerated suddenly. Wei Wuxian escaped from Lan Wangji's protective range and rushed forward suddenly. "Wei Ying!" Lan Wangji was startled and shouted loudly behind him. Wei Wuxian's heart was beating fast, but he didn't know what he was thinking at this time. He ignored Lan Wangji's obvious worries and continued to rush forward regardlessly. The spiritual power was passing through his body bit by bit and was about to be exhausted completely. However, Wei Wuxian continued to accelerate, as if he was trying to burn out the last ray of light, and continued to rush forward desperately. "Wei Ying!" Lan Wangji's shout ripped through the air and his wrist was tightened. It was so tight that it would crush his wrist bones. Wei Wuxian cried out in pain immediately and staggered. Before he could react, he was pulled by a terrifying force coming from the side. His feet left Suibian suddenly, and Lan Wangji held his waist tightly, dragging him onto Beichin. As soon as he was hugged by Lan Wangji, Suibian lost control and fell down immediately. Lan Wangji turned around and caught Suibian. Beichin fell down a little gradually, but did not fall back to the ground. Instead, it returned to the inn along the same route. "Lan Zhan? Hey, Lan Zhan!" Wei Wuxian started calling Lan Wangji on the way back relentlessly. But Lan Wangji ignored him from beginning to end. Even when they arrived at the inn, he pushed Wei Wuxian into the room and locked the door. And then he sat at the table, with his back to him, without saying a word. Only then did Wei Wuxian realize that Lan Wangji was really angry. Very angry. He knew he was in the wrong, but he felt in his heart that it was really nothing. After all, he was fine now. As long as the danger was concerned, there were many life-and-death accidents in the battlefield of the sun shooting was back then. He didn't see Lan Wangji being that worried. "Lan Zhan." Wei Wuxian sat down opposite him, took the initiative to pour him a cup of tea, pushed it over, and said kindly, "I am wrong, okay? Don't be angry. I apologize to you." Lan Wangji didn't say anything, and didn't even look at him.